Let's get started.
Hey everybody, welcome back to this week's episode of Texas Narcos, and we are going to wrap up our third installment of our three-part series on Behind the Badge. And we're going to move into some conversation right now about your family and your relationships, within the family. Specifically right now, we're going to talk about the marriage, right? So being a cop in general can put a strain on your relationship, can put a strain on a marriage. Dawn, you want to talk about some ways in which that's happened?
Sure. Statistically, a lot of people in law enforcement don't stay married.
Yeah.
They have multiple marriages. I mean, there's infidelity. There's all kind of issues that you see at work. And so one thing that I am really grateful for is the constant honesty
right
between us. I think that makes a huge impact. We just don't keep anything from one another, whether it's, a purchase, it doesn't matter what it is, and so that and doing our best to keep God at the forefront of our marriage, and raising our children in church and knowing who we are in Christ, has helped. Although there have been seasons where we have strayed, kind of going through our own deserts at different times, but how you being in law enforcement has really impacted our marriage. Hasn't been the time away, I don't think, so much as it's just been the impact emotionally, and just, we both have had trauma in our lives, and there's been times when we weren't dealing with it. We didn't want to deal with it. We didn't think we needed to deal with it,
right?
And so that has impacted us. But like I mentioned in a previous episode, we have gone and looked for, different weekends where it's about marriage, but it was specific to law enforcement, or, gotten away, and, how we are currently dealing with it. Sometimes, your mom will keep the kids, even if it's from like 5 p.m. one night till noon the next day.
Right.
And we have a staycation, or we go camping like at a state park that's 20 minutes from us,
right?
Just having that time together to just be us and remember why we're in this.
Yeah. Try to don't forget those date nights. Take your wife on a date. Take her, out of town for the weekend. Something like that. Just the small things. There's one thing, and I've talked about this on previous episodes, is how important it is to have that person at home who is holding down the fort, if you will, so that way, whenever you're at work, you can be at work and you can keep your head in the game, right? So that you're not worried about what's going on at home. You're not worried about if the kids are getting in bed on time, or, all that different kind of stuff. I think that's a very important aspect, and you've done a really good job over the years of doing that, so that I don't have to worry about, what's going on. I know that you got it, right?
Right.
So, I appreciate that. And, just do the small things, right? Like, so I like to wear different kinds of socks, and so from time to time I'll come home and there'll be a pair of socks on my nightstand that, has a cute note that, relates to the pair of socks. I know this is stupid. This is a little thing, right? But, it's the little things that count, right? So, just try to keep that, relationship going, right? So,
especially when things aren't good, because there's times in our marriage that we thought it was over.
Yeah.
A lot of times, and we just we weren't really relating well.
Right.
But then we realized we do love each other. We just maybe weren't liking each other for a little bit at that time, and I think this happens I think it happens in other marriages, but, and that aren't even involved in law enforcement. But I think when one of us starts to show effort to the other one, then it reminds us that, yeah, we're doing this, we're doing this life together, and there really isn't anyone else I would rather do life with. I just, I'm not happy with you right now, or maybe I'm just not happy with me. And so it comes across that way. Some of the little things you do for me. One, you always know where my keys are. That's a great, and my phone. You're the keeper-upper of all things in our house. And so, but also I love mushroom coffee in the morning. And so you just having that ready for me when I'm ready to walk out the door is so nice, because I rarely have time to make it for myself. Or if it's really hot outside or it's really cold outside, you'll cool or heat the car accordingly, so that we don't get into a freezing cold car or really hot car. I just, little things like that. I've left my keys at home for work, and so you drop them off on your way to work, or just having each other's backs. And when you are going through those tough times where you don't really like one another that much, but that's especially important to start doing those little nice things for each other. Just being nice.
Yeah. 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 No, that's definitely important. What do you think is the most understood aspect of being married to a cop? Like, that the public would think?
Like, misunderstood?
Yeah.
I mean, okay. I don't think that the public in general understands the amount of trauma and impact that a person in law enforcement, or any kind of first responder really, can have, or the importance of dealing with that. In general, I know that some people have a perspective that male cops, mostly male, but I guess it could be female as well, but, are heavy drinkers, or are all about infidelity, or, they have these addictions. Whether, it just depends on what their addiction is. But I think that I've been very fortunate that you don't have any of that. I've never been scared of you. I've never, you're a very even-keeled person. But I think, in general, the way the media paints law enforcement is, the bunch of hyped up people that just want to beat other people up. And that is just, I don't know anyone in law enforcement and I've met a lot of people across the time in your career that are like that.
Right.
And I'm not saying they're not out there. Right. I mean, I know they are. Yeah. But I think that's misunderstood that, that somebody that's a cop has this like alpha, control freak personality. And that's just not the truth.
Right.
A majority.
How do you think that the public perception of law enforcement in general can affect your family? Specifically, we kind of briefly mentioned this earlier. There was a situation that happened back early on in our marriage, early on in my career.
Yeah.
I'd been on maybe 4 or 5 years at the time, where I was involved in a critical incident that happened, and the media spun it completely out of context, they just went off on a tangent about, how much of a bad person I was, and, all these horrible things that I'd done, which were not the case. Because, at the time, the department didn't release a whole lot of information about it. And so people in the media and everybody else just kind of got to make up their own
speculation.
Right. So, and that did lead to some threats that were made on social media and stuff like that. So how important, or how does what the public perceives about us, how can that affect your family?
Well, the way it impacted us, you had taken a different position to be home more regularly because we had a newborn. And that was the first time I really became aware of how things can be spun so differently from the truth in the media when it comes to law enforcement. And, they had painted you out to be this awful person. And it was infuriating to see that and to see your face all over the media in towns far away from us.
Right.
At the same time, it brought a sense of community and comfort because the people who knew you knew what kind of person you are and knew that couldn't even possibly be true.
Right.
And, so you get investigated by internal affairs, you get investigated by the Texas Rangers, and then, the attorney for this other family ends up involving the FBI.
Right.
And I just knew the truth was going to come out. You had done your job and you had done your job well. And so in the end, I remember it comes out in the papers that, you have been exonerated, that there's no, there are no charges against you. And all 3 investigations proved that not only did you do your job, but you did it well.
Right.
And, but in the meantime, the people in our church, the people that just family, even, they all knew. And so they would, text us or call us or in passing say, hey, I know this is going to work out. We're praying for you.
Right.
And the truth did set you free.
Right.
But it was a little bit scary when there were some social media posts about you and threats towards your family. And then I don't remember the name of the guy, but you worked with him, and I think he was a what's it called when you're just keeping your license, but you're more retired?
Oh, yeah, like a reserve.
Reserve, there you go. So he was a reserve officer, I believe, had a big 600-acre ranch, and offered, hey, if there's any, validity to these threats, you're welcome to come and stay on my ranch. And nobody even knows where it is or how far back you'd be. And so, knowing that the law enforcement community in and of itself was supporting you and was willing to even let us move.
Right.
Thankfully we didn't have to. Everything worked out. But, so that was definitely an impact. And so what I would say to people about the media is don't believe it at all. Right. If you see that, this cop has done this or that, find out the whole story.
Yeah. Or
just wait and reserve your judgment. I'm not saying there aren't bad apples in every career who have done things that are not right. I've seen you watch things that are like, oh, that's probably not the whole story. Yeah. I've also seen you watch the entire thing and say, yeah, that lady should not have done that.
Right.
So there are situations where absolutely people are being mistreated.
Right.
But I believe that by and large that they're not.
Yeah.
It's not the whole story being portrayed. It's just a moneymaker.
Right.
Getting viewings.
What do you think that the public should understand about the human side of law enforcement, especially when it comes to, the officer and their families, because, everybody in the public and the media and everything, they have a idea, they think of who these people are. They're, they're machines, they're robots, whatever. Mm-hmm. But what do you think that people should understand about the human side of the people who wear the badge?
I think people need to remember that these are normal, ordinary citizens who have wives, husbands, children. They're somebody's brother, aunt, uncle, son, daughter, whatever, and that they're human, and that in a critical situation, no matter how much training you've had, you have a split second to make a life or death decision sometimes.
Right.
And, of course, you practice and you go to training after training after training to prepare you for these events. But you're human.
Right.
And you had a split second.
Right.
And that's why I think, and I would just, any spouse of a person in law enforcement should think about before they talk to their person at work. You don't know when your spouse is going to have to make one of those life or death decisions that could end up with impacting their life or the life of someone else's, is to try to keep your conversations light.
Right.
Try to not bombard them with a lot of stressful things at home. There are times that we have had to have conversations that were stressful because you just needed to calm me down.
Right.
But I really do try to make sure that the conversations that we have are not stressful, because I don't know what you're going to do in 10 minutes
right.
from now.
Yeah.
And I want to make sure that I'm not causing any additional things to be on your mind when you are having to make
right.
Such serious decisions.
Yeah. And you've definitely done a good job at that. Like you said, there are times where, I'll get a phone call. It's like, I need you to talk to your children. They're about to drive me up the wall. I'm trying to get them ready for bed. You're not here. And I just need you to talk to them. And so there are those situations, yeah. Right? But, the vast majority of times that doesn't happen. So,
right.
And I kind of talked about that earlier, where having that person at home that's going to keep everything going. Because like you said, the last thing that you want to do is to call your spouse with all these problems that are going on at home, and they're out there and they are 2 minutes later, they're in the middle of a situation where they have to make a decision that can impact a lot of people. And you don't want those problems at home to be clouding their judgment or clouding their minds. So that's definitely a big one. Especially
when it comes to having to work late.
Mm-hmm.
We know some people who their spouses get really upset with them if they're not home on the perceived time they're supposed to be home. And they give their law enforcement officer, or especially narcotics investigator, a hard time.
Right.
About, well, you're supposed to be here and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
Like, don't do that.
Right.
Just understand that's the job. You agreed to support them.
Right.
Or maybe you married them and they were already into it. Well, you knew what you were getting into. Or maybe you didn't really understand it, but now you do.
Right.
Just let it be, because you want your spouse to be as safe as possible. And,
yeah,
they're going to be late.
Right.
Whether they're in law enforcement or, if there are trust issues in your relationship, which I'm really grateful we don't have that problem, but I know other people do have those, then deal with that, but not in that moment.
Right.
Let them be late, deal with it later, go to therapy, whatever you need to do.
Right.
To work through your problems in your marriage. But while they're out there on the streets, doing God knows what, and you don't necessarily know how dangerous the situation is, pray. And that's how I get through it. I don't think that I could, I don't know how I could get through some of the hairy situations you're in, are about to go to a bust, or, you're, a lot of times it's SWAT doing it. Sometimes it's just you and your supervisor, that's going to hit a house. And you don't know if there's somebody holed up in there with a gun or whatever, is to pray God's protection. Every day our daughter prays that the Lord keep you safe, give you discernment and wisdom, for you to make good choices.
Yeah.
And for protection of you and your team.
Right.
And that gives us that peace.
Yeah.
And the one time, I think it's really been the only time, and it happened maybe a couple months ago, where you were at home, your supervisor called you and said, I need you to go, I think, was it to check on a house or do something?
Yeah.
And I just had this like horrible gut feeling that if you went, you weren't coming back. And I tried to keep it to myself at first, but then you noticed something was wrong and you were like, do you not want me to go? And I'm like, well, you have to go. And I just have a really bad feeling. And I don't know that if it's something that's going to happen there or in a car accident. I don't know what it is. And so you're like, okay, well, I still have to go. I really do need to go. My supervisor's asking me to go. And I remember I was switching clothes and out of the washing machine to the dryer. And I just broke down, crying. I like everything in me knew this would be the last time I saw you.
Right.
And it wrecked me.
Right.
And you saw that. And you're like, do you really have that bad of a feeling? And I was like, I do. And I have never, ever felt this in the 14 years we've been together.
Right.
And you heeded that warning.
Right. Yeah. It was,
and you figured out a way.
Yeah. It was a rainy night. I had to travel a long distance to get to where I needed to be. And, I made some phone calls. We figured some things out. And, we determined that, it wasn't that important that we do this particular thing that night. And, ended up not having to go. But yeah, that's. And
the sense of relief that I felt when I found out you weren't going was just like, it was almost like I was giddy, happy.
Right.
And I believe that there are times that the Holy Spirit impresses upon us situations to keep us safe.
Right.
And, just like we would be all geared up, ready to go for a weekend trip on our motorcycles, and one of us would get a bad feeling about it and we wouldn't go. Right. Maybe one time we just rented it. We still went, but we went in a Camaro.
Right. Yeah.
Or whatever. But, it's important to listen to those gut feelings too. I know that's a little off topic, but
yeah, I agree. We're going to try to wind down this episode a little bit. So looking ahead, how do we plan for the future, given the demanding nature of this work? Can we talk about, career trajectory and potential changes to, the career down the road? I know, I'm on the downhill slide of my career. I've got 9 years left till I can retire. Mm-hmm. And, what's the biggest hope that you have for me as I continue to work for this next 9 years, both personally and professionally? Obviously I've started this podcast thing.
Right.
And I hope to grow this eventually into, a bigger podcast, bigger audience, and then eventually jump into the training world. I want to start offering training through Texas Narcos in the future. So what would you say about all that as far as
that's a great, I'm sorry.
No, that's it.
That's a great question, because you and I have very different career paths and goals for our quote unquote retirement. Right. With you, I know that you absolutely love your job. You love the team that you're with. You guys laugh all the time. You guys and girls laugh all the time. And I love that for you.
Right.
And so I hope that you get to continue that for as long as you want to continue that. And, but looking after retirement, I know that you want to, travel, do some training. Maybe you continue your podcast because you're doing some travel with that as well. We're on a trip to Omaha for that.
Right.
And, I think that we'll be able to find a balance. I plan to open a school of my own when I retire, outdoor education and the whole 9 yards. But once that gets started, and I have staff working for me and a director, I can hopefully join you on the road, to go with you to these different trainings and help in any way I can for that. And then when you're not on the road, you can help me with the ranch and the, I hope to be able to eventually take in some kids who are exiting CPS, aging out, and give them a future. And so there's, our hopes and dreams are very, very different, but we have already been talking about what it is that we want to do and how we can make that happen for both of us and still be happy and still fulfill the calling that God has put on our lives.
Yeah.
And finish raising up our children and
I would
have that empty nest.
Yeah. After I retire, I would like to, I'm just imagining having like an RV, like a motorhome type thing with Texas Narcos on the side. We'll have, I'll have a mobile podcast studio in there, and I'll be
awesome.
Traveling the country, meeting with different people, doing interviews, putting on trainings, that kind of stuff. But yeah, it definitely is important, I think, to start planning, even if you're in the beginning of your career or if you're at the tail end of it, is to look at what's coming up after, the life after the badge, if you will, and preparing for that, because like we've been talking all along, is eventually this ride that we're on is going to end, and you're going to get off, and you got to know what you're going to do whenever you get off, and what who you're going to be with. So that's all the time we have for this episode. Stay tuned, because we're going to have a special bonus episode, if you will, coming out soon with a interview with our children to talk about their perspective on what it's like to be the child of a cop in 2024. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this 3-part series, Behind the Badge with Dawn. Hope you got something out of it, and we'll see y'all down the road on Texas Narcos. Thank you for tuning into this episode of Texas Narcos Podcast. We hope you enjoyed it. Remember to hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, share our podcast with your friends and family. You can find Texas Narcos Podcast on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and iHeartRadio. Your continued support helps us to bring you stories like the one you just heard. Thank you, God bless, and we'll see you down the road on Texas Narcos.